We do live in two different worlds. It's fascinating to see. It's amazing to see.
Which base? The Democratic Party base or the Republican Party base? Which one do you think is more opposed right now to war with Iran? Which one?
The left. It's not even close.
It's not even close. Exactly. That's the point. And so
No,
if you are going to build,
if
you're going to build a grassroots people-powered movement with bodies in the streets to oppose war, where do you need to go for those numbers? The left, because they're already there with you. And by the way, the MAGA base, the minute that Trump says we're in a war with Iran, they are going to overwhelmingly back him because they have every single time.
You have the numbers already.
I'm so sorry that I have to do this. I really don't mean to be petty. But I have to check in on Cenk Uygur's anti-war coalition with MAGA to see how that's going, because if you'll all recall, he made some really, really bold claims about MAGA and whether or not they'd follow Trump into a war with Iran. And just to refresh your memory, right after the election, he tweeted, "I've been trying to figure out why I'm more optimistic now than I was before the election, even though I was so against the guy who won. I know now, MAGA is not my mortal enemy, and neither is the extreme left. My mortal enemy is the establishment, and they have been defeated." Now, if you were under the impression that he was calling Trump anti-establishment, you'd be reasonable to think that based on his wording, but apparently his optimism didn't stem from Trump himself, rather from Trump's base, who elected him because they thought that he was anti-establishment. And Cenk officially moved the goalpost to that specific position on January 7th when he tweeted, "I didn't say Trump is anti-war. I said MAGA is anti-war. So we're going to find out soon if I'm right or not. Because if his base says we should spend even more money slaughtering the defenseless Palestinians just because Trump's donors support Israel over us, then I was wrong." Now, Trump continued to do that, and they continued to support him. Nonetheless, Cenk maintained that position for quite some time. On June 20th of 2025, the 8th day of Trump's first war with Iran, he spotted one whole tweet from a now deleted MAGA account to prove that the Max left was indeed wrong about MAGA, arguing, "This is a person that a lot of the left think doesn't exist." Well, they don't now since their account's gone. "I see hundreds of comments like this every day." If that were true, he'd probably screenshot them to prove how right he was. "They're real people. They're not lying. They said anti-war, they mean anti-war. No, they're not in any cult. They're just trying to pick the least establishment person." He added, "A huge portion of the radical left really does believe this. They think every MAGA voter who says they're anti-war is lying. I get why the politicians and media figures might be lying, but what incentive does an average MAGA guy have to make up his position on war? It's not like they're shy about sharing their real opinions. Who are they trying to trick and why?" And on the same day, Cenk called on MAGA to prove the left wrong about them, writing, "Trump has given MAGA 2 weeks to convince him to not go to war. He's not going to listen to the left or anyone else, but he might listen to America first. He's trying to decide between you and the donor class. So if you meant it, this is the time to show you can stop a war." Now, he also scolded Max leftists for questioning the authenticity of MAGA's anti-war views, saying to user I am Sock, "Yes, driving away the anti-war part of MAGA from a coalition to prevent the war is a much better idea," he said sarcastically. "If you call them liars and yell fascist at them, that'll probably work better. I literally can't believe that you're blind enough and tribal enough to believe that." Now, 2 days later, he was still waiting for the MAGA opposition to this war to materialize, and he challenged them to be as anti-war as they claimed they were, questioning whether or not they would, quote, "grab some pom-poms and turn into neocons cheerleading for more war or actually pressure Trump to stop it." But while he was waiting patiently for Trump supporters to tweet their opinions at him, people in his replies like Josiah showed him public opinion polls that, kind of disproved what he was saying. Not to mention there were also some Trump supporters in his replies justifying Donald Trump's war, indicating their support for war with Iran, but Cenk kind of just put Iran aside and remained steadfast in his optimism and ended up claiming victory over the MAGA-hating Max left less than a month later, arguing that he had definitive proof that Trump voters weren't in fact in a cult, writing, "I had a disagreement with many other left-wing hosts. They said Trump voters are all a cult and they would never criticize Trump. Now that even MAGA is ripping into Trump over Epstein, this debate is over, right? It'd be detached from reality to think they're not criticizing him." But when user I am Sock pointed out that they were more outraged at Pam Bondi than Trump himself, Cenk accused the maximalist of being willfully blind, and he went on to explain how he had the wisdom and foresight that us far leftists lacked, writing, "Why did I think independents who voted for Trump," another goalpost move, "and even some MAGA would break from him on some issues? Because I bothered to talk to them and listen to them. Their politicians are completely full of shit, but a lot of those voters are genuine genuinely anti-war and anti-corruption. And that's why they were so right and we were so wrong. See, they actually took the time to talk to MAGA podcast hosts, who, as we all know, represent all of MAGA, and Anna, for the first time, spoke to a Trump supporter, her neighbor Jeff, who was super nice to her, and because they had these important conversations, they were able to discern things that the hateful left never could have. That MAGA wasn't some monolith or a cult, rather they were a coalition of principled, anti-establishment truth seekers who were a little less mean to them on Twitter than leftists. But bravado aside, reality did start to catch up with the Young Turks little by little. Anna, to her credit, ended up admitting that she was wrong about Trump being a fascist, and she was also wrong to take Trump at his word regarding Project 2025. Meanwhile, Cenk clung to the few anti-war MAGA chuds that he could find, like Marjorie Greene and Dave Smith and some tweets here and there, in order to prove that he was right all along and the left was wrong. And that MAGA, they weren't as gung-ho about everything Trump was doing as the politicians are, because you see Marjorie Greene and Dave Smith aren't. And since they represent all of MAGA, obviously he's right and you're wrong. But when you fast forward to the current conflict and look at the public support for it among MAGA, I do think it's time to admit that Cenk Uygur maybe was a tiny bit too optimistic about MAGA, because as Gabe Fleischler points out, polls show that there is no MAGA split on Iran. Across 3 different polls, YouGov, CNN, and NBC, anywhere from 80% to 90% of MAGA Republicans approve of Donald Trump's strike on Iran. But it gets worse, because Adam Johnson writes, Republican support for bombing Iran was 53% according to Quinnipiac's poll from January 14th. And then it shot up to 85 to 90% after Trump attacked Iran on February 28th. So there is a vague current of anti-war sentiment within the GOP, but the lesson is that it's superficial and easily jettisoned whenever their cult leader goes neocon. He adds, one more piece of context worth adding is this 2015 PPP poll. It found that 30% of Republicans supported bombing Agrabah, the fictional country from Aladdin, with only 13% opposing. Dems were 19% for, 39% opposed. The degree of knee-jerk anti-Muslim racism can't be overstated. In other words, Cenk, my friend, buddy, I think it's time for you to fill out that apology form to the max left. It's time for you to take the L. Because if you just pretend like you weren't comically fucking wrong about MAGA, I don't think you can live this down. But if you take the L and you say, yes, I overestimated MAGA's ability to be principled, I think that we can move on. But you were so smug and comically wrong that you can't just pretend like this didn't happen. They support war. You were wrong and you have to eat shit and admit that you were wrong. Now, listen, in all seriousness, I'm having a lot of fun, but I'm not trying to needlessly shit on the Young Turks because, I praised Cenk with a couple of videos last year when he took genocide supporters to task. I thought that was commendable, so I give credit where it's due. But I think that we need Cenk's major fucking L to serve as an example for other MAGA curious pundits and even some potential 2028 Democratic contenders that you cannot reason with MAGA, and if you do, we're not going to take you seriously. This is a political cult that cannot be reasoned with or appealed to. As Cameron bluntly put it on Twitter, I don't know what word we can use to describe these people, but sheep or cattle. They literally have zero beliefs about anything except supporting Trump. And believe it or not, that's actually a really important point that everybody needs to acknowledge, because if we don't acknowledge that fact of reality, then podcasters are going to continue to coddle MAGA dipshits, and politicians will continue to water down their policies in hopes of appealing to MAGA dipshits, a portion of the population that is living in an alternate plane of existence and are totally not fucking gettable. And I have to pick on TYT a bit because they were one of the few centrists or populists or whatever they call themselves these days who still feigned ignorance about MAGA when everybody knew it was nothing more than a glorified political cult comprised of empty heads to be filled with the values and principles of Trump's liking. And almost everybody saw it, so the question is what took them so long? Even Trump's cronies see it. For example, Trump is apparently giving shoes to his cronies, and they were afraid to not wear them, even though, at least when it came to Marco Rubio's shoes, they were clearly too fucking big. But if Rubio doesn't wear them, then he risks offending Donald Trump. And if you offend Daddy Trump, you offend the MAGA hive mind, which you're going to need on your side if you want to run for president in 2028. So do you want to know what Marco Rubio did? He beclowned himself and put on those big-ass fucking shoes because he needs to stay in the good graces of the MAGA cult leader, because he knows that it all could go tits up for him with a single fucking tweet. He'd get excommunicated like that. But if you're wondering how people as intelligent as Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian could possibly think MAGA isn't a cult as late of 2025 and presumably 2026, It's because they have terminal cases of podcast brain, where they think that MAGA podcasters are somehow representative of regular MAGA voters. In fact, they probably still think that MAGA is anti-war, because in one of their latest videos, they talk about how Trump is taking heat from MAGA, but it's just MAGA podcasters like Megyn Kelly and Joe Rogan, as if the skepticism of Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly is indicative of a broader trend with MAGA voters. But just take a look.
It is exactly the opposite of what President Trump ran on. Exactly the opposite. And yet Fox News is salivating over the prospect of more war, an extended conflict, and Lindsey Graham is its spokesperson.
You do be seeing Lindsey Graham on Fox News quite a bit these days. Like, I feel like he makes multiple Fox News appearances per day. He's like sweaty. He seems a little bit manic, like super excited, like salivating over the thought of like bombs dropping on the heads of civilians in these Middle Eastern countries, like totally depraved lunatic. And it feels good that for once you're hearing people who aren't on the left call it what it is, okay? These people are warmongers, and Trump did renege on pretty much everything he campaigned on.
Yes, because glazing fascists who helped Donald Trump get elected is, I guess, preferable to admitting that they were wrong and the left was right to call bullshit on how anti-war MAGA was from the very beginning. But, you know, putting aside my own pettiness, I actually do think that people like Ana Kasparian and Cenk Uygur, they do need to admit that they were wrong about MAGA, full stop. Because this idea that MAGA can be courted and won over is naive and downright fucking dangerous, because it's keeping the Overton window firmly in the right when we need to cut our losses and move forward without MAGA if we ever want to make progress in this godforsaken country. And even though leftists like myself have been accused of living in echo chambers, the reason why I'm so cynical about MAGA is because I know them better than a lot of people. As I explained on a recent Rat on Leftist Mafia, I'm cynical about them because I have them in my family. It's not that I'm getting my idea of who MAGA is from podcasters. I know these people in real life. Okay, this is a non sequitur, but I have to bring it up because it still triggers me. Ana Kasparian and Cenk, how they talk about how, and I'm so sorry, I have to do this. They talk about how, oh my God, nobody wants to talk to the other side. Ana Kasparian's like, I actually talked to my neighbor Jeff. He helped me carry in my bike and he was lovely. It's like, okay, that doesn't mean you are like, that's not an accurate representation. You don't live with these people. You don't go to Thanksgiving with them. You don't have to interact with them anytime a family member's in the hospital or a fucking funeral happens. Like, you don't have to live with these people and suffer. Like, they don't make you suffer. You could say bye, Jeff, and close your door, and you never have to see Jeff again. Maybe like when you're leaving and you see him in the parking lot. Like, you don't have to deal with these people. The people who are the most cynical about MAGA are the ones that have them in their motherfucking family, and that's me. I have them in my family. They're the worst people. They are irredeemable. Their brains are fundamentally fucking broken, and there is no way to repair it. And so, like, listen, I think that we have to figure out some way to bring these people back to reality. I don't know how you do that. I think we have to start talking about radical solutions, like mandatory education.
We don't have time. We don't have time to sit and hold the hands of people who are about to chug unpasteurized milk. I unfortunately, I think there's a lot of battles to be fought. I'm not going to stop them from shitting themselves to death at this point. So drink all the unpasteurized milk you can get, all the methylene blue that you can get your hands on, avoid all vaccinations, eat nothing but raw red meat and salt excessively, and tons of alcohol to consumption. I don't have time now to fight that battle as well. Right. Like there's way more nice people that deserve healthcare.
Yes, we have to basically push them to the side and govern the country without them, and do our very best to rehabilitate them. If that means mandatory education, that's what we have to do. Like, I'm sorry, like people.
Mike of the Humanist Report says we need gulags, literally.
For the record, I don't mean gulags. Was that convincing? But anyways, Ana and Cenk, if they actually spoke to actual MAGA diehards as opposed to, say, podcasters, I don't think that they would be as optimistic. And this goes deeper than MAGA, right? There's always been this portion of the population in America wandering around with empty heads that they're looking to fill with something, anything, right? Sometimes it's conspiracy theories, sometimes it's fundamentalist religion. They're just not intellectually curious enough to form their own thoughts, so they seek out entities that'll dictate how they should think for them. That's what they want. And this is not something that I'm just like pulling out of my ass. I've seen it firsthand. I remember a conversation that I had with a family member before they joined the MAGA cult back in like, it was like 2010. It was during my neckbeard days. And we were watching, this is weird, but stick with me. We were watching 19 Kids and Counting on TLC, and I commented that I don't like this family because they teach to their children young earth creationism, which was stupid. Now, my fundamentalist family member asked me why I didn't like creationism, because even though we were kind of taught that, they didn't know about that word. And when we grew up, you know, we were evangelicals, but we didn't focus so much on how old the earth was. But I explained I didn't like that they were teaching their kids that because it was objectively wrong. They think the earth is 5,000 years old, and that's just idiotic. Now, do you want to know what that family member I had this conversation with told me? They deadass said, oh, well, if that's what they believe, I guess I believe that too, because I believe in God, and I believe that God created the earth. I mean, I could have just lied, I guess, and given them the correct answer, but it just goes to show you that they have no thoughts of their own. It's just, well, the tribe thinks this, so I think that too. Now, to be fair, this person was already, again, deeply fundamentalist, so they probably already were told that at some point. I'm surprised they didn't already identify as creationists, but again, we never really heard that term. They didn't, at least, but it stunned me and it stuck with me because like there wasn't a single shred of curiosity or critical thinking, and it hurt me. I had to like reckon with the fact that there are people in this country who don't want to think. They don't want to think. They're renting out their brains to religions or politicians. And that was deeply disturbing to me. Now, fast forward to today, and the same person who I had that conversation with thinks that Trump's ties to Jeffrey Epstein are fake news and probably supports war with Iran because they think it's going to usher in the end times. Now, yes, this is anecdotal, but it's generally the mentality of Trump's biggest dick riders, right? This is the rank and file that Cenk was desperately trying to sane wash for some reason. All that Cenk had to do was talk to somebody with MAGA family, and I'm sure that they would confirm that they are indeed insane. They have plenty of stories to tell, right? I mean, if TYT wanted to talk with one of Trump's biggest supporters, I would have put them in touch with my uncle, and Cenk would try to bring up like paid family leave, and my uncle would start shitting his pants and shrivel up into a corn cob at the thought of any person of color or any immigrant benefiting from some kind of support from, corporations or the government. It's just not acceptable, even though he's on welfare himself. Like, the bottom line is that there's no getting through to these people, and it's frustrating that individuals like Cenk and Anna are so dense that they refuse to acknowledge that reality, and this reality is important. We all have to come to the same conclusion if we're ever going to survive as a country, okay? We have to disregard everything that they say and just move forward without them the best that we can, because if we keep ascribing intelligence to them and pretending like we can get them on board for some vast political coalition, we're going to continue to let them hold us back. That doesn't mean that you don't try to foster class solidarity among working people, because of course that is the ultimate goal. But my point is that we need to get better at knowing when to cut our losses, knowing when people are just too far gone mentally. And MAGA truly is a lost cause. If you are still with Donald Trump in 2026, the year of our Lord, you are a lost fucking cause. And us fixing the country hinges on the sane Americans waking up and acknowledging that uncomfortable fact of reality.
Ideas. In recovery mode, my brain ideas. In recovery mode, my brain ideas.